Welcome to the Catholic Commission for Social Justice and the Archdiocese Ministry for Migrants and Refugees latest episode of Ask Why. And ask why what? Ask why there's inequality in society. So I'm really excited today because I feel like this is going to be, I always say this, but like I truly mean it this time. This is going to be a very rich discussion that we're about to have. And I'm particularly excited because we have Miss Nadine Bushell with us today. And Nadine, for those who don't know, is the original moderator for Ask Why. So Nadine, welcome. It's really, really exciting to have you on board. And it's
Thank you, Dominique.
It's a pleasure to have somebody, a co-moderator, because I feel like we're going to have a really kind of intense discussion about something that is affecting us globally. There is nobody in the world who has not been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic in one way or another, whether it be a health issue, whether it be an economic issue, whether it be just a mental health issue. You know, we have all been significantly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, which we all know started in Wuhan, China, back in November 2019. And now we're in 2021, coming to the end of 2021, and we're all still in a state of anxiety, of lockdown, of not knowing what the future holds for us. So today we're going to talk about COVID. We're going to have a special Ask Why edition of the COVID conversation. So Nadine, thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm excited. But before we get kicked off into our questions, please allow me a minute to read Nadine's very rich bio. And Nadine, can I say this before I read it? Where do you find the time? Because
I wonder myself sometimes, but I find it.
Well, I'll tell everybody where Nadine finds the time. Anytime I have messaged Nadine, she responds immediately, whether it be late at night or early in the morning. So that you work consistently and you do an excellent job, Nadine. So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Nadine is a member of the Procurement Board of Trinidad and Tobago. She is currently the program coordinator at the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM Impacts. At CARICOM Impacts, Nadine is responsible for managing the agency's portfolio of programs and projects. This involves project formulation, implementation, monitoring and evaluation, as well as resource mobilization. Nadine's career has been in the field of development and project planning and management. She has worked in this field in the public service of Trinidad and Tobago in the Ministries of Planning and Development and Community Development, Gender and Culture and Gender Affairs. Previously, Nadine worked with the United Nations Development Program, Caribbean Sub-Regional Resource Facility based in Trinidad and Tobago. Nadine has extensive experience liaising and working with various international and regional development agencies and various stakeholders, including government and civil society, to mobilize and to manage the utilization of development resources geared towards national and regional development. Nadine has a master's in science and development and project planning and is heavily involved in civil society work in the Caribbean region. Through her involvement in the International Association of the Lions Club, she is also a past district governor of District 60A, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname, and a past council chair for the Caribbean region. Nadine is also very active with the Catholic Commission for Social Justice in Trinidad and Tobago. So yeah, thank you. Nadine is one of our board members. And as I said, the former moderator for Ask Why. So Nadine, once again, thank you. And for those on Trinity TV who are regular viewers, you would have noticed that Nadine has been moderating the social justice series for Know Your Faith. So make sure to tune in and check out Nadine and our lineup of speakers for Know Your Faith. Learn more about social justice, because the reality of social justice is, if we're going to bring society to a place of wholeness, of equity. There are certain aspects that we need to face, and social justice covers the spectrum of inequality within our society, which brings me back to the COVID conversation today. So there's been a lot of back and forth about the vaccine. So let's start here. So Pope Francis has said that we are all obliged to take the vaccine. And I quote, taking the vaccine is an act of love, love for oneself, love for our families and friends, love for all peoples. Love is also social and political. So Nadine, should we be taking the vaccine? What's your stance on this?
Well, from my personal perspective, I think given the information that we have now, that we should take the vaccine. However, I think we have to bear in mind that there are persons who have serious concerns about taking the vaccine. Like I, for one, for instance, at first, I was like, I'm not taking that. If that is developed within a year, that's not going to be a good vaccine, because as far as I know, vaccines take a while to produce. So when a vaccine is produced so expeditiously, I heard the argument that people said that they pumped a lot more resources into it because of the urgency of it. I bought that to some extent. And then I thought to myself, okay, is this vaccine making thing a money-making issue? Because, for years you have persons investing heavily into vaccines. So I'm thinking maybe the companies before were prolonging the completion of the vaccine in order to get more resources. Or I thought on the other end, these here now are rushing to get the vaccine done quickly because there's an economic opportunity. So because of my skepticism of how persons operated in the economic sphere, I felt that there was some concern there. And then you have to remember, most of us are not health professionals. So we would not have the detailed information that is now coming to us. We took vaccines, yes, but this is the first time that there was an issue that the vaccine was so urgent as far as we were aware, and a lot of information was not in general public. We have to remember the average person on the street wouldn't have the technical information. And while we have press conferences and so, who is really listening to that? It's not the average person. It's those of us who want to be informed and watch the news. And then, of course, people have the legitimate concern to know, well, okay, what would this vaccine do to me physically? Because there are a number of complaints now, or a number of issues that have arisen from persons with respect to the vaccine. You have the issue at first was possible blood clotting. Then you heard the issue of women with respect to their menstrual cycle. And I think to some extent, because they want persons to take the vaccine, sometimes they are not seriously addressing the concerns that persons have, and they are kind of minimizing it because they want to encourage the vaccination. So while I would support getting vaccines, the public education is critical, and the public education that meets persons where they are. So I would say yes, but we have to respect those persons who have concerns about the vaccine, because I had a family member who told me, I am not an anti-vaxxer, and persons are being quite disrespectful in saying that I'm an anti-vax. She said, my children are all vaccinated. And she finds that based on her concerns, and she did her research in the different countries, and she's saying that you can still get the COVID if you take the vaccine. So what's the point? So we really have to address persons' concerns holistically and at the level that they can absorb the information. Because even for me, I was like, you're accustomed getting information, but like this vaccine thing is just a little bit too much. You're trying to understand the science. I can't understand the science of it, but you need to explain it in a way that I am able to process the information and say, okay, this seems reasonable.
That's actually, you kind of hit on two things there that I kind of really want to delve into deeply here. The first is, one, you spoke to a family member who had done her research, but she was still, just giving people the space to make that decision on their own. But there's still an element of, and this might be the wrong word, but almost bullying You know, there seems to be a schism within society. Either you're a vaxxer or you're an anti-vaxxer. And somehow, if we're, and going back to the universality of the Catholic Church, if we're gonna, you know, come together, and as Pope Francis says, we need to come together because we're all interconnected. But if we're gonna do that, you know, what we're seeing within society is COVID has brought people apart in a lot of ways. And what you've highlighted with the whole vaccinated, unvaccinated population is one of those big issues. Now, Nadine, you work for CARICOM. And so I'm really, really interested in the regional perception of things. You know, we've seen within TNT that there is those that are for the vaccine and those that are not for the vaccine. There's, as you've rightly said, there's a lot of hesitancy because of, and again, I don't want to say poor education, because there have been educational campaigns, but whether they're hitting home and really hitting the target is a different story. But what's the feeling like of the islands, and have there been any successful programs to your mind?
Now, in general, just to give you some of the vaccination rates for some of the Caribbean territories. So like St. Kitts is approximately 45%, but we have Grenada at 15.4%. We have Barbados at 15.4%. This is as I think 26th of, not 26th, 24th of October. Okay. Barbados at 37%. And our countries at 43% above they're hovering right now. The truth is, a number of the islands are under 20%. They have a few between 30 and 45%. I think perhaps the Bahamas has reached close to 50%. So what you're finding is that there is that lack of hesitancy all throughout the islands. I think even, and I actually checked some of the rates in other parts of the world, which may not have to do with hesitancy. Like in the Caribbean, the issue is hesitancy. Because in the Caribbean, we have generally had all the vaccines required to vaccinate the majority of the population. So our issue is hesitancy. Mm-hmm. Then you have the issue, like I looked at Kenya, they had 2.5% vaccination rate. I saw Nicaragua had 5.6% vaccination rate. I had Kyrgyzstan, I can't pronounce it properly, 11.5% vaccination rate, but Bahrain has 72.5%.
What is Bahrain doing?
Right?
That's interesting, yeah.
So those figures point to a number of issues with the vaccine. Like when you look at a country like Kenya, that I think would probably be the issue of not getting access to the vaccine. And the Pope has spoken about that you had a number of countries who had access to the vaccine very early. Even we had first struggled with access to the vaccine.
I remember.
Now it's no longer an issue. So for the Caribbean, there is a hesitancy to take the vaccine. And I work in the law enforcement arena, crime and security. And even in that sector, there's even a high degree of hesitancy there. And that is of concern from a national development perspective, because if you're persons who have to interact with the public, your law enforcement officers, you think of them only in situations of crime and responding to criminal activity. But a lot of times they play a very critical role. Like they are the persons who secure your health facilities, your schools, where children are attending, a number of, when they have natural disasters or any incidents, like any accident or so, they are the first responders, and they have to, in a number of instances, physically hold people, either to arrest them or to help them out of a particular situation. So when groupings like that are not vaccinated, it is a cause for concern, because it's not only strictly a health issue, it's a security issue. And if you have a number of your essential services not vaccinated, where they say if you're not vaccinated, the transmission rate is higher. If you have an issue of essential services not vaccinated, and persons have to use these essential services, you can have a health crisis, that's one. and even a security crisis if your persons get ill and if they fall ill and they can't respond and they can't work. So all of those things impact on the well-being of the society. So there has to be respectful conversation, and the conversation cannot be simply on the television and the radio, because I think the truth is, okay, at Trinidad and Tobago, that has been well done. The television, the radio, the press conferences, the person cannot ask for more information through those media. So perhaps like some of the MPs or the councillors may have to do small group meetings at the constituency level or the local government level to help those issues. And say if you have an issue with law enforcement, that you are able to go directly to a grouping within there to discuss the issues surrounding the vaccine, the risk that it poses if they don't take it to themselves personally, to the society. I think we may have to go that route.
Yeah, you know, and as you rightly said, you know, if first responders aren't properly equipped, and we could actually say that's what the vaccine would be for them. It's putting on that level of armor. Now, let's talk about what's happening with unvaccinated people right now. We're in a situation where, and I'm going to pull up a recent headline. Most of our COVID ICU beds are filled with, well, firstly, we're at capacity with our ICU beds nationwide. And most of those people, I think it is 96% of those within the ICU bed are not vaccinated or not fully vaccinated. So that's got to say something in terms of just putting on that daily armor, because the reality is we need to open back society. And this is another aspect of the conversation that I want to have with you right now. The reality is, from your standpoint in within the protection services, food security surely is a big issue right now. And how is that going to impact our crime rates if our economy is shrinking as it is? And I want to give a recent statistic from Republic Bank on this. Unemployment is expected to be at 5.04% in 2020 and 5.1% in 2021. Now, that is showing a rise in unemployment. We know that job losses are significant, and there was that somewhat recent Guardian article that said over 6,000 businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, would not open back up as things started to open back up. So we've had a shrinking in the economy. We've had an increase in unemployment rate, which means people are on the breadline. People are hungry. Food security is a big issue. So of course, we're going to see a rise in crime, and crime out of desperation some of the time. So what kind of trends are we seeing there?
Well, when you speak of crime, remember when the COVID had just started, the crime rate, because there was nobody on the street to rob, there was, you know what I mean? So the crime rate had dropped. I just want to make a point about that. Now, when COVID started, it gave us a breathing period at first, because of course we didn't think this is going to go on for these number of months, right? So at that point in time, it kind of gave us a stop that I think persons were a little bit happy for as well, because they were able to reclaim back some space. You spoke about the issue of food security, and some persons actually started to grow as they were home doing nothing for months. They started to grow vegetable gardens and so on. They realized that they think that they could do for themselves. So COVID did present an opportunity for us to see, well, okay, these are things we can do. People were cooking more at home, and I'm assuming healthier than buying all the fast foods. However,
personally, I was one of those people who gained a little weight.
I said healthy food. What were you cooking? Burgers and fries?
Everything.
Okay. So even in that context, the COVID did provide an opportunity for us to realize that there are things we can do for ourselves to keep us alive and fed. right? So we can't deny that that experience that you would have gotten. But we also have to recognize that, of course, if businesses close for an extended period of time, there is going to be a fallout from that. And there are two things I want to highlight there. One is this may appear to be a little bit insensitive, but what this COVID has taught us is that tomorrow is not guaranteed. Your income the next year or the next 2 months is not guaranteed. And we all have a personal responsibility to be able to put aside for a rainy day. I know many of us are not working for sufficient resources to have a large amount of savings, but we have recognized it is important. So while there's a responsibility for economic activity to keep us going, we also, as individuals, have to be prudent with the way that we use our resources, how much we keep aside for a rainy day, how much we even give to assist other persons, because there are a number of persons whose income was not touched by the COVID. They were even home for a few months or not working as hard as they probably are accustomed to. There are those who worked very hard throughout still. I'm not saying that there aren't persons who did that. But how many of us who have not been affected by our income have looked to assist others who would have been affected? So the sense of community responsibility, the COVID had to have also taught us that, say for a rainy day, if you're not affected, you are to assist other persons who are affected and to provide whatever required support there is there. And with respect to the job loss, I know there were a number of comments from persons, like where businesses may have cut persons' salary to cope with the shutdown and so, that they are accustomed making so much money all the time. Why they couldn't continue paying their employees. There were comments like that, which also highlights that persons are skeptical of others based on the experience they have had with those individuals. So the skepticism didn't come just like that. It's because of what we have seen over the years, how business owners have treated their employees and exploited employees. And so we are thinking now, you exploited the persons, why can't you now, this is your opportunity to give back. Now, I'm not saying that there are businesses who did not support their employees, and a number of businesses actually gave their employees hampers and so, even though they couldn't pay them. So we have to applaud the employers who did that. Yeah. But we have to also recognize that the way that people view certain sectors of the society are a direct result of their experiences with them previously. So the COVID to me highlight a lot of these issues, so that these are things that we must internalize and bear in mind, so that we can really make a difference and improve as a result of this experience of the COVID.
You know, that's actually a really excellent point, because what you've highlighted there is somehow, and I think it's prevalent throughout, is the lack of trust that currently exists between different spheres of society. Because you're right, rightly so, you know, how have business owners treat, and I'm not saying this is all business owners, but in general, how this is something that we need to address. How do we treat the people that work for us or who we work for? You know, do we feel that sense of value that I think is arguably a big source of discontent throughout society? You know, and I want to, going to this whole idea of value and value for the self, I want to speak to them.
Can I make one point before you go into the value? Now, we spoke about the dignity of workers in terms of COVID, persons being exploited perhaps in better times and not being given the support now that they required. Now, a new phenomenon has also emerged that I relate to the dignity of workers. We have new ways of working. Now, many of us are working virtually online. So because people know that you're home with the lockdowns as well, you're always accessible and available. So the number of my friends, family members who have spoken now of the disrespect that is meted out to them by not regarding their time, their personal space. So you get called to Zoom meetings whole day, every day. And a lot of workers are actually producing a lot more at home. And we really have to, in the new environment that is going to emerge, because I don't think we are going back to that full way we were working before, everybody out and about. We have to find ways to preserve the dignity of workers and to help everyone settle into whatever the new normal is going to be. So I wanted to make that point. You really need to pay attention to new working environments, what they would look like, things like health insurance, accident insurance. I'm using my electricity at home, who's compensating me for that, but you want everything done. Those are issues that we now have to reshape how the policies are designed to support them and to maintain the dignity of the worker.
You know, and going on from that point, as you've rightly said, who's compensating for the internet bill and these sorts of things, because we're constantly on a Zoom call. Like for us, for example, just this program, we're on a Zoom call right now. But what that, to me, what that sounds like is we need to reestablish boundaries, because you're right. And I said it before, I could call you anytime and you respond. And I don't recommend that. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing to do. But the truth is, you know, a lot of people just in conversation, we're constantly working now. It's almost as if that if you have a job, your job is 24/7. If you don't have a job, you're stressed out because you're unemployed and you don't know what you're going to do next. But either way, I feel like society is operating from a place right now of burnout. We don't know what's going to happen next. You know, we're experiencing severe mental health issues from the point of our family members may be in danger. Our job security isn't the best. Our general well-being isn't the best right now, because no one really can pin down what the future holds. You know, so how is this topic of burnout and mental health, how are you seeing it come out within your sphere?
Because, okay, I have an example. My cousin told me once that, imagine they call a meeting at 6:30 a.m. because they said you don't have to travel to work, you're everybody home. So you call a meeting at 6:30 a.m. You know, what is that?
Yeah, no.
That is disrespectful. I mean, I know there are persons who work across different regions, and so you may have to have early calls. We're not talking about those things. But where you have environments where persons are all in the same geographical location, and to make a comment that you're not going anywhere anyway, so you could usually, what they figured is that you would have gotten up, have to get dressed, travel, get to work. So the hours between 6 and 8, you can't have any meeting, but now you're home, so you can have a meeting. Now that is really not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And many of us have to find ways now to be able to speak to our employers to say, listen, I require this time, and I think it should be respected. You know, I can't be available all the time, because other people who are home, they have children to deal with online school. So they have to still organize themselves. And whereas before, when you went to work, one, you had the hours of travel to disengage, because you can't work while you're driving necessarily, or although some of us may have been on calls, work calls while you were driving. You also, when you were in the traditional work environment, your children were away from you, the teacher was seeing them there. But when you are now at home and the children are right next to you, you have to make sure that they are paying attention, that they are well fed during the day. And if there's an issue with the internet, you have to go and see about it. So you also have to bear those things in mind. Yeah. So a new workforce would have to reorient its mind to develop policies to support the family structure, to support a healthy working environment and persons' mental well-being. Because many persons, as you say, are burnt out. And because you're always available, when there were physical meetings and you had to probably go from one building to the next, so you get at least 10 minutes time. So what you do now, you find you have a meeting at 9, you finish at 10, one starts at 10, goes to 12, and you have a meeting with somebody on the other side of the world, so you have a 12 o'clock, and there's a lack of, there's no time to think, which is also critical for creativity. If you want employees to be able to work sensibly, to be able to get ideas, they have to have time to think and not just be running. And I don't think a lot of employers understand that.
No, I fully agree with that. And, you know, as a mother who is working full time and homeschooling children, what you say is literally, you've just described my day, you know, and so quite literally, but, you know, and thinking about those, and I have a lot of support. I'm very fortunate. I'm one of the lucky ones. Families that do not have that level of support. And when I say support, I mean just my children having devices, you know, and we could touch on this topic right now, the school children going back out to schools, because that's a nice hot potato unto itself. You know, the reality is, yes, we have the health issue that we need to consider, but we also have the psychosocial fallout of our children not being able to go out to schools. And for example, you know, just to give it context, I just want to give a quote for our SEA results. Statistics on the secondary entrance assessment, SEA exams, which showed a decline in the number of students scoring 50% and above, and an increase in the number of students scoring 30% and under. Now, that's a real issue, because we're now in a situation where children, you know, they haven't been able to keep up with online school. It's going on almost 2 years when children have not been in school. And where is that? How are we going to catch up with that gap? You know, it's almost, again, the divide, which seems to be the theme across COVID, is widening in terms of our children's access to education.
Because you would have heard some persons would have said, like certain schools, when they had to go online, there was no issue. It moved very seamlessly into online. There were some schools now where the children, one, didn't have access to devices, two, didn't have access to internet facilities to support doing online learning. And that was a certain sector of the society. It was not across the board. Mm-hmm. And the concern with that is that now those persons, even in an imperfect environment for everybody, they were now doubly disadvantaged, because you had to depend on parents in some instances going to the school to collect the packages. And I have a friend who's a school principal who said she has to be calling the parents who did not come to collect the package. And then you also have the case where a number of schools, you heard from the like the principals associations and so, that the teachers themselves were not sufficiently equipped with devices to do the online learning, which is of concern to me, because one of the issues that I think, not just for education, but in general, our society, I think, has been fortunate in that we have had access to resources, financial resources, because of our natural gas and our oil reserves. We have had access to resources. So the condition that a number of schools were in, the lack of infrastructure within the education system, in the health system as well, even though we created a parallel health system, the existing one, as you know, wasn't too hot to begin with. Mm-hmm. And this COVID has highlighted the need for us to pay attention to those things. When we have resources, what do we do with it? A number of us complain about corruption and so, and corruption prevents resources going into legitimate development activities, which would have resulted in a number of these glaring deficiencies across the society. So we have schools that didn't have resources to pump into online learning, as some schools were able to do it without batting an eye.
Yeah.
And then now you have the issue, generally they're all disadvantaged because don't have any social interaction. Then you have those who don't have access to the devices. And that could further widen the gap with them.
And that's, this is where it all reverts back to social justice, because one thing the COVID pandemic has shown us is exactly that, the inequity within society. And the reality is we need structural change, because we can't go into we can't continue on. And I don't think this is just my personal opinion, but it doesn't make sense for humanity in the broader sense to continue on when there are such wide gaps between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And
that is a real issue.
Yeah. And somehow I still feel it is the blessing of the COVID pandemic. It was almost like a mirror to show us who we really were. And I think Pope Francis says it best. The pandemic has brought to the fore and amplified the pain, the solitude, the poverty, and the injustices experienced by so many people. It has unmasked our false sense of security and revealed the brokenness and polarization quietly growing in our midst. So
yes, that is, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, so what he's saying there is very true. But on the flip side of it, because it has exposed these things, it provides us an opportunity to correct them. And even, they said necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. Now, I think to some extent, the whole digital transformation, many things that people were indicating can't be done online and they're making a lot of trouble to get done, they are now able to miraculously get it done via virtual means. And I often watch like Morning Edition and those morning programs. And when I watch them, I was telling someone, because I'm also seeing the creativity of the human spirit. A number of persons would have had to, if they wanted to survive, they would have had to pivot the way that they do things. They have to eat. So you saw a number of new enterprises and ideas coming to the fore to help individuals cope with the COVID. And this, what Pope Francis has highlighted to us, we as Catholics now have to see how are we involved, because many of us are involved in these injustices, either knowingly or unknowingly. And since it has been highlighted to us, what are we doing? How are we helping to address these systemic injustices that exist in the society? And we have to ask ourselves that. We as teachers, do we go the extra mile? Are we willing to go the extra mile? We have neighbors who we could assist children a little better in their community. So it's a number of issues that we really have to take at an individual level. A lot of us are looking for the church to give us guidance, but it's written in our hearts what is right and wrong. And there are things that we as individuals can do to provide support, either financial. We spoke about the issue of mental illness and loneliness. Mm-hmm. Now, with the COVID, despite the COVID, everything else is bad, continues to happen. People are getting heart attacks, people's family members are dying, a number of things are going on still despite that. And what would have happened normally, you would have had a number of events and so to help people cope. You could take them out to go to do certain things. That almost right now is non-existent. And some persons want somebody to talk to. A number of the older persons, especially Catholics, the church tea party, the church function, the Christmas event, the little family day provides opportunities for persons to interact. That does not exist anymore. Persons want stress relief. Where do they go for it? And a lot of that can be, I know we can't mix physically, but things like these Zoom calls. So, you organize Zoom family events. Some people have been doing it, but many have just been like recluses. So we really have to pay some more attention to some of those simple things that we on the individual level can do, not just the church organizing charity events. We as individuals in the society can assist others.
And I want to totally reiterate what you're saying, because as we come, Nadine, as usual, we've run out of time, but as we come to the end of the show, this is a key issue for World Day of the Poor, which is going to be on the November the 14th, and Justice, Peace and Community Week, which is going to run from the 13th of November to the 20th of November. And it really focuses on that, how as we as at an individual level can act and show mercy. So bringing in for the Catholic community, and even wider than the Catholic community, because I think we're all now called to step up and assist in some way, the corporal acts of mercy. And what that says is, one, we are obliged as Christians or followers of Christ to feed the hungry, to give shelter to the homeless, and to give water to those who are thirsty, and also to bury the dead. And and there are more acts of mercy, but those are the ones that really pertain to the COVID issue. And as you rightly said, we can reach out to people virtually, people who have lost loved ones, who are grieving, and the reality is, the way the COVID pandemic has developed, we can't even be with our loved ones as they die in hospital. That's a very tragic thing. I have a friend whose father went away and just never returned, and never having that closure of, one, burying him, of seeing him ever again. 1 minute you're there and the next minute you're gone. And people like that, situations like that are not uncommon anymore.
No, it's
So
not.
yeah, and we need to come together for the living now to support each other, because the reality is, we don't know when we're coming out of this, but we will only come out of it together. So,
Yes.
Nadine, once again, thank you for taking the time for joining us. We hope to have you back on, in the next few weeks as we wrap up this series of Ask Why. And once again, on behalf of the Catholic Commission for Social Justice, the COVID pandemic is a challenging time for anybody. If you have any concerns, if you feel like you need support, if you know anybody who needs support, please feel free to reach out, and we'll do our best to put you in contact with the right people. On behalf of the Catholic Commission for Social Justice and the Archdiocese Ministry for Migrants and Refugees, thank you once again for tuning in for another episode of Ask Why. Good night, everyone.
Good night.